The Vikings made a very interesting move ahead of their game against the Tennessee Titans, and this move was one that absolutely worked. We're going to be talking about this, what Kevin O'Connell did, and how this actually worked. We're also going to be talking about a player that the Minnesota Vikings needs to re-sign ahead of next season, and what implications this will have if things go in a different direction for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, before we get into all of this news here today, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join us here on the channel. We're covering everything Minnesota Vikings. And Griffen, the Vikings got a huge win against Tennessee over the weekend. One that some people will say they got a bit lucky with due to the penalties that the Tennessee Titans had, but some are also saying that we were just the more disciplined team, and that's what I'm also thinking and what rolling with. But in this game, the Vikings did make a pretty big change, and the move worked, and I have to say I'm very excited to see what options the Vikings are going to choose to go with over the next few games. And for those who don't know, this change was moving Dalton Risner to right guard, putting him ahead of Ed Ingram, and placing keeping Blake Brandel at left guard. And as you can see by this graphic, Dalton Risner was not in both guard positions for this game. Don't worry about that. Don't mind that. But this is a very interesting move that I think a lot of people were really excited for. I think I made a video about this when we see Dalton Risner supposed to come back, that there was a chance he was going to play right guard ahead of Ed Ingram, leaving Blake Brandel at left guard, and with him playing well. And they did that. It worked out very well, I have to say, and I'm very happy with how this move played out in this game. So, Griffen, how did you think about this? What did you feel about the offensive line here in this game against a pretty good defense in the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah, Titans defense isn't anything to scoff at. I know the Titans aren't the greatest of teams this season, but that defense has stayed very consistent and has done a good job at shutting down other offenses in certain moments. I know Jeffrey Simmons is one of the best guys in the business really right now as far as interior defensive linemen go. But again, this is one of these things where Minnesota's offensive line has seen so many shuffles and so many changes this season that when things haven't been working on the offensive side of the ball, like we saw against Jacksonville, where there was a lot of things that weren't working that led to Sam Darnold throwing a lot of picks, we had to make sure that those battle of the trenches were won. And with making that move, yes, it gives Ed Ingram a chance to learn more behind Dalton Risner, gives Blake Brandel a chance to really step up and see what he's made of as well. He's played fairly solid this season. So now we can kind of see what this offensive line is made of and see kind of how this offensive line competition plays out throughout the course of the year, where it's going to be a bit of a revolving door, but the chemistry is still going to be there nevertheless. And now it's just a matter of what's the best lineup of guys that are going to work for that particular game.
I completely agree, and this adds another layer, I guess, to the whole mix-up that the Vikings have on the offensive line, as well as Cam Robinson and, taking over the place of the injured Christian Darrisaw. So the Vikings are going to have a lot of stuff to think about over the next, few weeks as the season progresses, really seeing what they want to do and what direction they're going to choose to go in next season. But we also have some quotes here from Kevin O'Connell about this topic, and this is what he had to say about Dalton Risner. He says, "I wanted to take a look with Dalton being healthy now, seeing if we get a little bit more of a veteran presence there, consistent. It was a tough challenge to have Dalton's first start on the right side be against Simmons and Devontae Sweat. That's the two best things the interior guys playing right now in the league. We'll look at the tape. We'll see how Dalton did. I felt his play style. I felt him totally. I felt him totally into this game." He also goes on to talk about Ed Ingram and his reaction to not playing. He said, "I was proud of the way Ed handled it and handled the week as well, knowing he'd be one snap away from." Being one step away. He also asked great questions. He was prepared and ready to roll, so we'll continue to try and find that best five. It's definitely not going to be a week-to-week thing, but we're going to allow some competition to play out while the season is still 7 games left, and the ability to try and hunt the best 5 guys to get the most out of all of them." And this is a very, pleasing quote for Vikings fans, I think. Ed Ingram, especially coming off starting every game this season, sitting then behind Dalton Risner, who's playing his first game at right guard. That got to be a bit discouraging, but I do like the fact that we did see Ed Ingram sit, ask questions, really seeming to want to get back in there and learn from a guy who's been in the league for so long in Dalton Risner. I think that this is really a good spot for him right now. We know that Ed Ingram isn't the best at this very moment, but I think there's a lot of potential. There's been, people calling him a very big hit or miss player, like he's going to play very well, and if he don't, he's going to be one of the worst players on the field, and I can kind of agree with that. He has a very big boom or bust potential in the game so far this season, and if we can get away from the bust, I think that he could be a very, very good guard in the NFL. And Griffen, how do you feel about what we're seeing here from Ed Ingram and his reaction that Kevin O'Connell kind of said what he was doing in this game?
great that he's taking an approach like, yes, it's exactly what you want an athlete to say or want your player to say, because they're not taking it personal. They know it's just business, and he's open to learning. He wants to keep learning. He wants to improve his game, so he's not taking it personal in that sense as well. And it just goes to show that the Vikings have the depth at offensive line where we're not locked into who the number one guy is. Like a lot of teams where they have their set number one guys, they have their set number two guys, and it's a big step and a big drop off in quality from those number one and number two guys. But now we're in a spot where maybe our number two guy isn't as good as a number one guy, but at least it's not as much of a drop off from number one to number two as it would be for most teams. So at least now we have some depth that we can kind of shuffle around. Like Kevin O'Connell said, find the right mix of 5 guys that we're going to have up front over these last 7 games, so that if and when we make the playoffs, we have the right lineup going in, so we're not getting exploited at any turn. And it goes to show that it's almost like matchup based kind of offensive lineman making, where if they have a matchup that they like where they want to prefer putting Ed Ingram in that spot, put him in there. If they prefer Dalton Risner against that interior tackle on that particular game, put him in there. Do what works best game to game, and I think that's what Minnesota is going to do for sure.
Yeah, they have a lot of potential. And Kevin O'Connell has been able to see over his career as not just the Vikings head coach, but also the offensive coordinator for the Rams, being able to see the Vikings offensive line and the struggles they've had in the past. And now him as head coach, he don't want to have those issues. And the way that we've seen him build this offensive line is something that, as you mentioned, Griffen, he wants guys that can kind of play really anywhere on the offensive line. So having the best matchup possible is something that it seems like he's really focusing on, and something that's going to be a fresh thing for Vikings fans and the Vikings offensive line to be able to kind of relax when we see some pressure coming towards the quarterback. But on top of that as well, we have another very big update regarding Byron Murphy and a contract update in that a whole kind of scheme of things. And this is all coming out about his play this season and what we're going to be seeing for him in a new contract sense. And I'm going to pull up this screenshot here. It says, through 9 games, Byron Murphy is tied for 3rd in the league with 4 interceptions on the season. In the past 3 weeks, he's graded as the 3rd best cornerback in the league and the highest graded cornerback this season. And having him as one of the best, ranks 18th and 71.4 defensive grade in Pro Football Focus. And realistically, we're not thinking that Byron Murphy is going to be a guy that we would see a big extension coming for him. It's not a guy that we think that would be a number one priority as an extension, but kind of going further into this as well. The 3 cornerbacks of Stephon Gilmore, Shaquille Griffen, and Byron Murphy are playing on expiring contracts, and the Vikings are going to need to re-sign at least one of them. And in our minds, you know, and as well as from this article, as you can see, we do know that we're going to see at least a contract coming to Byron Murphy after this season. And the way he's been playing has really been surprising a lot of Vikings fans. Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffen, you know, those guys are as good as well, but the fact that Byron Murphy is so young, how good he's been playing this season under Brian Flores, and how much potential we've seen him have, 26-year-old cornerback is certainly going to be a major option for the Minnesota Vikings. So, Griffen, do you think that we're going to see him out of all of these guys get an extension, especially with the way he's been playing, the whole kind of plan that we're going to see from the Vikings cornerback room, and with all 3 of them being a free agent? And we will discuss the other free agents here now in a bit and kind of go into why this is going to be such a crucial extension for the future for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I think of all the cornerbacks, I think he's the one that you prioritize the most. He's leading the league with the interceptions. He's leading the Minnesota Vikings as far as our best defender right now. And this is a defense where he's not the only shining star. This is a defense that has multiple shining stars. So you want to make sure that you can keep that together as much as possible so you have sustained success for the next few seasons. And Byron Murphy being extended is a major step towards doing that because of the impact he had last year going into this year. You know, he kind of really broke out last year and just carried that momentum into this season, and he has just ran away with that opportunity, and he's really shown up and shown out, especially when looking at Shaq Griffen and Stephon Gilmore. Those guys are solid, those guys are good, but they haven't risen to nearly the level that Murphy has this season. He's really shown up and shown out, so obviously you want to see him get locked down. And kind of like you said, where if he was on any other team where most teams have just superstars at cornerback, they have that one lockdown corner where guys are just terrified of and it's just a matchup nightmare. He's not one of those guys necessarily, but he is that guy in Minnesota. He's that guy that's going to create you turnovers, and he's just integral to his team. It's just like Harrison Smith. Yeah, Harrison Smith would be good on any other team, of course, because he's an all-time great safety. But being on Minnesota, it just feels right. It feels different, and he plays different than he would anywhere else just because he loves this team, he loves this city, and he loves this team, and he loves this culture. So that's a big key towards why you want to extend Byron Murphy. We have consistently been number 1 in team culture by player voting and other areas as well. by having one of the best facilities and best organizations in the NFL. Keep Byron Murphy in that organization and keep this defense rolling forward.
Yeah, and the way this organization has really taught him so far, I only see so much more potential coming out of him. The same as Ed Ingram. The way that we're seeing this team develop these younger guys has really been incredible the past few seasons. And I only see more coming out of that. And another big reason why it's so important, I think that we should sign him, is 26 years old, going on 27, one of the youngest cornerbacks available. And if you look at the rest, Carlton Davis, Travarius Ford, DJ Reed, Jonathan Jones, a lot of those guys are probably going to be locked back up by their corresponding teams. I know a lot of these guys are going to be wanted by many other teams, and Byron Murphy there being one of the better ones available. If the Vikings lock him up, having him ready for this season, they can then go out and get another cornerback. And knowing that there aren't, I would say, too many cornerbacks out here that are really going to be available and going to be superstar caliber, the Vikings are going to have an option to continue to add at younger age players. And I think it's going to kind of pull out the exact same way that it is now. The younger guys are going to start developing behind the older guys and really just have a big pattern of a great organization, a great, development and everything like that. And it's going to play out very well. So, Griffen, what do you think we're going to do? Do you think that we're going to see, of course, one of these guys sign with the Vikings, or do you think that we're going to kind of go somewhere else, maybe a draft, but apart from Byron Murphy, of course, because we know that we want him back and we know that he should be a Viking. So what do you think the Vikings' plan is going to be for this?
DJ is one of the most appealing, is probably the most appealing name on that list. But again, it's a matter of if he's going to get locked down, because we know a lot of these teams are going to try and lock these guys down, especially when they're teams that are a little struggling and they want to kind of have more insurance for the future on top of draft picks. So if we see a lot of these guys get scooped up, I think for sure Minnesota goes and drafts someone if they don't get Murphy. But again, with looking at that list, that's just even more reason why you need to sign Byron Murphy, because when looking at that list, there's not a lot of guys that jump out to me or that appeal to me in the same way that he does. Not nearly enough. Ward, yeah, he's good, but I would still take Byron Murphy. The numbers are speaking for itself. He's making those picks. He's making those plays and forcing fumbles. He has just been he's doing what he needs to do, and he's making the highlight reel plays. And we've seen more of him on the highlight reel on national television than we've seen any of these other guys on the list. And he's been the most talked about, and he's been the most buzzed about, and he does show the most upsides and potential. Jeff Okudah, we saw flashes of it in Detroit. We're seeing it in Houston now. Still not near the level of Byron Murphy. None of these guys really reached that level, and that's why it's a little concerning that if Minnesota doesn't get him, you got to go out and you got to take a chance on a draft pick. We're going to have to redo the Cameron Dantzler project almost, but hopefully with a lot much better results if we don't go out and get Byron Murphy.
Yeah, names you mentioned here as well. Very interesting, a lot of them, but we never really know what the future can be like. We don't know how long Brian Flores is going to have to teach these before many teams are going to be looking for him as a head coach. There's just a lot of things that the Vikings are going to want to do, try and keep their defense the way it is now, keep a lot of these guys home so they understand that Brian Flores mentality of defense, and go from there, really. I think that the Vikings do have a lot of potential in their defense, and they're only going to be looking for more as the seasons go on. But, that's all we got in this video. A lot of interesting stuff here, especially on the cornerback situation, the free agency, and we're going to get a lot of that more as the season goes on, and once we hit free agency as well, which is a very exciting time. But we still got a big project to focus on, the Vikings being such a good team, still bouncing back the past few games, and we're only expecting more. So, Griffen, you got anything before we finish this one off?
Can't wait to go into a Bears week where hopefully we can go into Soldier Field, get the W. It's always tough going into Soldier Field because that's one of the places where the Bears play us the toughest. We play them a lot better when we're at home. Hopefully we can go in there and we still are able to get wins when we go into Chicago, but they're always really hard-fought wins. Hopefully this is an easy one and we can just steamroll them and head into the next week.
Absolutely, I'm very excited about it. That's all I got in this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. We're signing out. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.